You got a hand from the bike, is that right? From us?
Yeah, a game that I think you'll be pretty familiar with, 5-5 at the bike.
Okay.
This was a couple months ago. This was my first time playing 5-5 at the bike, though I'd played two, three, 3 times before, so I was kind of shot taking.
So this is a 1K cap. Oh, I do have to ask you a question because you had said this in your email that you were the guy that a couple weeks ago that
Yeah,
was giving me some shit about talking about euros on
I
the
didn't give
show.
you a lot of shit. I think I just brought it up on the chat. I think your take, at least from my point, was like a bit off. I've played some of these games, and I do agree that there's like a lot of these like Euro type regs
Uh
there,
huh.
and
Yeah.
a lot of them can be like socially awkward and even just kind of drive away some of the fish. But I think it just kind of feels wrong to me to kind of just ban people based on calling people are based on certain races. You made that kind of comment in like Doug Paul podcast where you're like, well, Asians are fine. We want Asians in the game, but we don't want Euros in there, and we don't want like South
Right, and
Americans
then
or something
and
like that.
and
And
then you
so,
did. I think that I clarified that for you though
yeah,
too, as I remember, which of course is that it's not a ethnic thing at all. It's more of a residence thing. And the whole thing I had said is, and I'm not up for banning anyone specifically. I had just said that if I was a consultant or had maybe an ownership stake in one of these private clubs where there's a little more flexibility in Texas, that I might consider a residency requirement. And that residency requirement would most likely be some sort of US driver's license. And the whole Asian thing is because most of the time, Asian people live here, whereas the pros who are traveling from Europe don't. So that's what I was talking about specifically. Then somebody came up and said, "What about having a Texas residency?" And I was like, maybe that would be too. I don't know if there's enough of a base, and I could be off. Maybe you do need these sort of unpaid props where the card rooms want those sort of unpaid props in terms of full-time pros actually is better for the bottom line. I get that too. I was just saying just as a thought, but
one sort of counter that I had to that was
uh,
like, then you'd be driving out like tourists that come to just play from like maybe outside the country.
I don't know how many tourists though that yes, you would be. You're right. Yes, you would be, but at least from what I have noticed is that the foreign players maybe it's different in Vegas, but I mean my backstory here is from knowing from LA. There were like 10 pros to one tourist who were playing that weren't sort of US residents. Yeah,
Okay,
that's just my
well,
take. So
yeah.
anyways. Okay, so 5-5 1K cap at the bike. Okay. Yep.
5-5 1 keycap, we're 610 effective. That's my stack. The villain covers me. I was kind of shot taking, so I was doing this thing where I was buying off like for 500 to 700 in there.
Okay. Yep.
Um, yeah. So we have a straddle on for this hand. There has been like 2 to 3 people at the table that have been straddling, so it's kind of like an occasional thing. Most hands are not straddled, but this one is.
Okay. So straddle pot. Yep.
The we are under the gun +2, so under the gun straddles we're second to act.
Hmm.
We opened to 40
So 5-5-10
with
40, and
no,
then
so, yeah, 5-5-10.
so did you think that was a little bit just for whatever reason? If I because I've been in this exact situation before. Um, Karu, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Karu is fine. Karu is fine.
Karu. That's
Yeah.
easier. So I've been in this exact situation before Karu many times where I'm playing in a 5-5 1K cap game where it's not straddled that much. And I usually just go to 30. It's a little bit subtle. Also, you're coming off of a little bit of a shorter stack too. So, I mean, it's just something a little bit subtle just because because usually the race is to 20. So I don't know if people were raising off of
No,
when it
no,
was
that
straddled.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I was just playing in the bike like yesterday, and then in the same situation where I was short stack, where it was 5-5-10,
Hmm.
I was choosing a size of 30, but this was my first time, and I was
Okay.
like a little bit rigid in that sizing, I guess.
Yeah, no
So I was
worries.
thinking 4x, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So +2 to 40. Okay.
I make it 40. I have pocket tens. So I wrote down 10 of spades, 10 of clubs. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
It folds around to the straddler who calls.
And your heads up.
Yeah, heads up.
All right.
Nice
Cool.
and simple.
Yep.
The straddler at this point, I said I tagged him as like kind of the best player at the table. He's a reg for sure.
Okay.
So he was like three betting like quite a lot, playing aggressive post flop. Um, he kind of going into demographics, 'cause, like late 20s, early 30s, like white guy wearing like a designer sweatshirt with like a
Hmm.
fanny pack with like thousands of dollars of chips in there. So I've tagged him as like a good player.
Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
So we go heads up to the flop. The flop is an interesting one. It's four of spades, five of clubs, seven of diamonds.
Okay.
Four of spades, five of clubs, seven of diamonds.
Okay. Yep.
So rainbow flop, we have an overpair.
Right.
Um, so the villain is first to act. He bets 20 into the pot of 85 after the drop.
He leads into you.
Yeah, he leads in.
And you think that he's a decent player. That's interesting.
I'm for sure he's a decent player. My impression was that he's like a really good player.
So
But yeah, he leads in.
here's the thing, Karu. First of all, it is something to note here too, right off the bat, when you're looking for little nuances, bits of this hand, is that he doesn't have as many hands because you raised to 40. And what I mean by that is if I were to put myself in your villain spot, like if you had made it 30 or 25 and we're playing 5-5-10, even 30, I'm going to be getting like 2.5 to 1, but you made it 40. So there's 20 dead. So, it's like the pot's like 60 and it's 30 for me to call. So I'm not defending as wide as if you had just made it like 20 or 25, where like you could really sort of the range advantage really flows towards me, where I'm having like a bunch of two pairs, straights, things like that. Just because you did size up a little bit, again, we could be giving your villain too much, we could be giving him too much credit here. I would also look off of your stack size too. If I was the villain versus you, where you're making it 40, you only have 610, I wouldn't have as many hands. Now, with that being said, if this guy is an actual really good player, I know he's sort of donking really small here for 20. I would proceed very, very carefully. And if you're thinking about raising here, it's just one of these things where I can't, I hate raise folding in a, my gut is that you almost have to raise call off, but the problem, this is why you don't want to raise, right? The problem is that all the hands that are going to bet 3-bet you are going to have probably you crushed two pair or a massive amount of equity against you. So if you're playing against somebody good who's capable of bet 3-betting here, this is one where you kind of don't want to get blown off your equity. So I would probably call, even though it's a small bet. And that is the same type of situation where you will sometimes check back certain boards because your opponent will have such a sort of, card advantage on a board. It's sort of the same concept. But again, he shouldn't have that many hands because of your large sizing. But I would probably tend to call here if you thought the guy was really good.
Right. I
Yeah.
kind of get what you're saying right now. I see people in the chat. Some of them are saying like it's kind of an obvious call.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time that I was kind of in this, I was thinking, oh, I'm sure I must be ahead. I have an overpair. I better raise for value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I raised to 85.
So did you think about what your response might be if you did get 3-bet?
If I do get 3-bet on this board,
Mm-hmm.
it would basically be, let's see what the size would be. Would I be, if it's something like 200.
I mean, he's probably is just gonna. I mean, really, he should probably just be moving all in, right? Because I
Okay.
mean, once he 3-bet, I mean, if he just goes to like 225, I mean, in
Yeah.
essence, it's. I mean, I guess you could
I'm
call the
basically
wait for a safe
committed.
card, but I mean, it's not. I mean, it's just to wait for a non-3 or a non-6 or a non-8. But
If he moved all in, I think I might fold. I think I would lean towards folding.
well, you just kind of put yourself in a spot. I just want to mention that.
I
Although
did. I guess
although it
I
is,
realized that now.
yeah, it is kind of a small bet. So you raised to 85. Okay.
I raised to 85, he calls.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So straddle calls. So
Straddler calls.
170, so 260, right?
255, yeah, 260
Okay.
around. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The turn is the six of clubs.
So it puts a one-liner out there to
A one-liner. Any three or an eight is a straight.
uh-huh. And you have about maybe like four, just maybe like
485.
okay. Yep.
Yeah. So the villain checks,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is a very clear check for me.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say
I
so.
want to showdown at this point. Yeah.
I would say so. I mean, the other interesting thing too is that when you get into these situations, sometimes is like it's not always a check back, if you do have some, I would say semi bluff raises here, but it's just kind of a strangely played hand. I mean, you'd have to sort of develop some bluff raises like that contain an eight in it, right? Like ace eight of diamonds,
Right.
something like ace eight of spades, and then it's like, well, do you have some bets here on, on the turn? But for the most part, when you're raising, you're representing overpairs, and then you're just going to commit yourself if you bet here. So
I the way I was playing there, I think I do have like some of these like backdoor ace eights. I think I
as a
do have
raise
all
on
of
the as a
yeah.
raise on the flop.
I think so. Yeah, as I was playing, I would have raised on the flop.
Okay. Well, so you check it back, so it remains 255. Yep.
Remain 255.
Uh-huh.
The river is an interesting one. It's the 10 of hearts.
So you make a set.
Top set.
Yep.
Um, right. And so the villain checks again. So they've checked twice.
Checks again, huh?
Checks again, and I have a decision. I have a decision as to whether there's any value there left there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, and then the other question though too is that if the villain is a good play, this is really sort of interesting. I don't want to outlevel ourselves here too much too, because there's a one liner out here to an eight. There's one liner out here to a three. And if you're gonna bet some hands that aren't straight, and the opponent thinks that you're gonna have a high propensity of folding to a check raise, you have to call some hands that you bet for value without straights, and 10-10 would be the best one. That's one part of it. The other thing that I'm thinking about too here is that would your good villain, like, would he check two pair here? Because if I took the villain's line and you raised and I called in, let's say like my hand was like 5-6 and I decided not to bet three bet or something like that was two pair, I would think that I'd be betting at the end here for value, because you're going to be checking back like a ton of your overpairs. I maybe get some sort of crying call for somebody that just can't come off of an overpair. So it's interesting that he sort of checks now, and I'm kind of just trying to think about what hand he has. At the same time, your hand is very, very strong now, but it's a tricky little spot. But I was going to say, though, is that, again, at 5-5, I mean, you can really, really overfold to check raises. But if there was ever a spot where if you were going to bet a hand for value and you were like, I think my opponent knows that I never have a straight here, then you would probably have to bet call if you were to bet here 10-10.
Right. I decided to bet.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to bet 105. So small, thinking to get value from two pairs sets, maybe
Right.
some overpairs, though I shouldn't really have any overpairs. Mainly just two pair and sets.
Right.
And if I
But
enter stangs and I'm beating, they're not straights.
and I just talked about how I thought that the villain showing up with those hands with this line would be a little bit strange in my eyes too, right?
Fair enough.
Hence
Yeah.
the check. Yeah, yeah. So you bet 105, okay.
He goes all in to 485 total.
Here's the thing. I mean, my gut reaction here is that if you really do think he's a capable player, then I would call. Now, I'm not necessarily even saying that I would bet all the time, although I like to bet in these games, but we do tend to I think that sometimes at these levels we give our opponents too much credit. Just a couple other things too, like the sort of nuances of live poker at the bike. Usually this is not going to be the highest game running, certainly not the highest game running in LA. So I might question the fact, oh, how good is this guy, right, at 5-5? But the whole thing is really strange that he would check here and then check raise all in. Because would he even check raise all in with like a 3?
Right.
You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's kind of bizarre. I feel like if I were to bet, I would probably have to bet call, not expecting my opponent to check an eight here. You know?
Yeah. Based on like the pre-flop action, he surely should have a lot more straights than I do here. But there's a few things I was thinking here. One was how many straights can he possibly have? Specifically, how many eights can he possibly have, or eight nines, for example, if he is checking the turn and checking the river.
Well, right, right. I mean, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like it's just but again, I mean, there are times when we outlevel ourselves, but the whole hand just sounds, like I said, to sum up, if I were to bet the river, I'm going to have to call off of these stack sizes. That's my gut.
One more thing I'll mention is that there was like another hand, like maybe like 30 minutes ago, where this same player basically had the boards had like a king 10 and a jack, and this guy had ace jack, and
Hmm.
he basically raised all in as a bluff, and the other guy called with king 10.
So he's
So
so he's capable. Well, I mean,
he's
then
capable of
then it's
making moves with like a
then
pair.
it's for sure a call.
Yeah, I thought about it. I didn't think about it for that
That's
long. I
for
thought about
sure
it
a
for maybe
call.
30 seconds,
Uh
and then I called.
huh. Uh huh.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, if we're calling here, should we be treating this kind of as like a, should we be calling mainly linearly, or should we think of this more as a polarized spot in terms
Well,
of what hands we're calling with?
I mean, it's kind of a tricky question though, right? Because you probably wouldn't be betting any other hands that aren't better than one pair here, right? From what you were saying,
Right.
what you were targeting, right? So you were
I wouldn't bet a hand that's one pair. Yeah,
right. So I don't know if it matters. So the hands that you're betting for value are always going to be sets plus, right?
sure.
So
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
probably doesn't matter, right? I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
you might I don't know. I mean, there might be some, if you really drill down that maybe it's slightly better to have some other one of the sets that actually block the chance that he has
Blocks the
8x.
straights. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that's not really
Okay.
linear. So you call, okay. Yeah.
I call.
Yeah.
He flips over a hand that seemed very strange to me. It was four of diamonds, five of diamonds.
That is very, very strange. That is very, very, very
And I
strange.
have spent probably a few hours thinking about this exact hand. And the
Uh-huh.
one thing I've spoken about it with friends, one thing I
Yeah.
still cannot be 100% sure about is, was this a bluff or was this a value raise?
Well, that's the problem when you can't see. This is when I do poker commentary, like on Hustler or wherever. I always kind of giggle because if I can see the hands and I don't know what the opponent is doing when I can see the hand, like, in the card reader, chances are it's probably not the best play. If I can't
Right.
figure it. So this is exactly because you're seeing it, right? This is exactly what you're saying. It's got to be too far in between. I mean, it's really, really bizarre because we just talked about like, what are you betting here at the end for value? If it truly is the thinnest just sets are better and he's blocking like fours and fives here, it just doesn't make any sense, right?
Right. I guess perhaps in my impression that he was a really good player was off base, but I was, I mean, I really, everything, the kind of moves that he was making, the kind of three bet hands that he was choosing three bet with just seemed like
And
he
the
was
point,
playing well.
and by the way, the point, if someone doesn't understand what I'm saying, is that he's blocking some of the sets that the hero would bet for value. If hero's only betting sets or better, he's blocking some of the sets that hero, which is sort of the bottom part of hero's value range. So it's bad for him. He probably should have like more of a call here, right, than a raise,
Right,
because he
exactly.
either has the best hand or you're not going to fold, right? So
One thing that I was thinking of, did because of my perhaps short stack size and because it maybe seemed nervous because I'm short taking, does he think that I'm ever doing this with like an overpair like jacks through aces and he wants a call?
I don't know. I mean, that's just it. Just sounds it seems it seems really crazy to me. The whole hand really seems crazy to me. I
If he
don't
told me he
know
had
if
four
he
five, I wouldn't have believed it if he didn't show it.
I don't know what he thinks that he was really doing in this particular spot. It's just yeah, it's very, very, very strange. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Sure, thanks.